Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to sect this Moed Katan daf Yud. We're going to begin at the very top of Yud Amud Aleph. So the Mishnah said that Hahedit is Taifer Kadarko. When it comes to sewing on Chol Moed, if you are a hedjit, namely you're not an expert, so you can sew in your normal way. So Hechadami Hedjit, what exactly qualifies you of not being an expert that you can now do it kadarko? So the Gemara says like this: if a person is not able to take the needle and to be able to put it through several stitchings at the same time. If a person is not able to make a straight hem, then also that shows your lack of expertise. But uman machlif. However, when it comes to an uman, because he's an expert, he can't do it in the normal way because that's really a form of perfection. But rather, it has to be machlif. So my machlif. So Rabbi Yochanan Omer mafsia. What he has to do is he has to at least widen the spaces of the stitchings. Rabbi Bar Shmuel Omer shinoi kalavta. He has to make the stitches a little bit uneven. Misargin esamitos. So he says that a person is allowed to be misargin the bed. So if we're going to Rashi, shibamakam echad mekatzim makam echad marchivoy. Then you can make it a little bit longer, wider, not as more narrow. So that's what it means being machlep. So when it comes to these beds, we said you can be misargin. So my misargin, umay mematchin. So what exactly does this mean? Regarding being misargin and mamadchen. So Kiyas Rab Dimi Omer, he said, Pligi Rab Chia Barabba, Rab Asi, but Ravai Mishmei Dechizkia. Rab Yochanan Chada Omer, one says, what is misargin? Shesiv Erev. Making the stitches going, the ropes going the warp and the woof. In other words, going upwards as well as the other direction. So that is what it means. That's Shesiv Erev. So this is what the Mishnah says. It says that you're allowed to be misargin means you could weave the beds, and Rav Yossi says you can be mematchin, which literally means to tighten it. So weaving it is this notion of shesi ve'erev. Okay, umematchin shesi below erev. It doesn't mean tightening; it just means that you don't do the length; you only do one direction. Machadaimer misargin is shesi below erev. That shita says you could. When it says you can be misargin, you can weave it. It means only in one of the two directions. Umadchin is shim hayirafoy memadchay. That if, let's say, it was already in place, then you can tighten it. But not that you're able to do any form of weaving at all for these beds. Eini v'hatani Rav Tachlif bar Shoyel b'shavin, they agree. Shein mafshilin chavolim v'chachila. You're not allowed to twist these new ropes. Originally, you cannot do it. Now, Bishul Mamadi Armer Misargin Shesiv Erev and Umamadchin Shesiv Below Erev, that it's talking about, again, the ropes. You can put them in both directions as one. Tiny Rav Tachlif Bar Shol V'Shavin, they agree, Shin Mavshil Chaval Mechatchila, that you can't actually do this originally. Except it has to already be there. That it was already there, then you can tighten it. So Hasha says if Erev Amrit low, if you're telling Shes Erev you can't do, so Chaval Mechatchil Meboy Kasha. So again, it's harder to read, understanding that Mandoimer. Amalei Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak Rab Chia Bar Rabin Mi Iko Mandi Omer Misargin Shesibul Erev. Is there someone that says Misargin? What are you allowed to do is only Shesibul Erev, but not Rab Meir Omer Hamita Mishi Yisrael Ba Shlei Shabbatim. It says when it comes to a bed, it's when you weave it with these three sections. So this L'chayra is talking about Shesiv Erev. So Elokiyas Rabin. Rather, this is the maskana. Oimer, he says, Misargin weaving is kol yama lo putting into shasa erev. That's talking about that you do the warp and the woof, both directions. That they'll agree can be done. Eloki pligi b'madchin. When it comes to tightening, marsavar b'madchin shasa below erev. You can tighten it if it's shasa below erev. Marsavar she'im hayirafoy mimadchay. That if it was already there, then you can tighten it up. Meisvei misargin esemita vein sarach loimer shemimadchin. David Rameir. So Rameir says that you could weave these beds, and certainly you can tighten it. Rav Yossi Omer Madchen of Eloi Masargin. You can tighten but not weave. V'yesh omer ein memadchin ein memadchin koliker. You can't do it at all. So bishul mamadir memadchin shesibul erev. You can do one direction. Hainu di yasu yesh omrim leflugi. That's why yesh omrim come to disagree. According to the opinion that if it was already there, then you can only do is tighten it. So so could the you shouldn't be able to do that either. Whereas in because it's possible that you could have filled it up with other materials, so it's considered to be a tirchet seira. Says Rashi, the fact is, you shouldn't have to do any of these things because all you need to do is put cloth in that place instead, and therefore you won't have to go through this more challenging procedure, and therefore that's the reason why, even according to them, you can't even do this. Okay, let's look at question 9a. Misargnes amitos Rabbi Yehuda Omer memadchen. So my pirush memadchen. So what does it mean that a person could literally, seemingly, it means to tighten it. So we said according to one shot, memadchen is shesi beloy erev. So let's mark this down. Memadchen is shesi below erev. This is 9a. Alternatively, shim hayarafay memadchay. As I said, that not necessarily can you even do that, but it just means that you can tighten up the straps if it was already in place. Okay, next Mishnah. Mamidin tanur v'kirayim v'richayim b'moed. A person is allowed to set up an oven, a stove, and a millstone on Chol HaMoed. Says Rashi, what is a tanur? Tocho chol, inside it's empty, makom shefisas shtei kederos, and you can actually put two pots there. And a kira is makom shefisas keder achas. That's the difference between a tanur, which is larger, can hold two pots, as opposed to a kira can only hold one. So this is allowed to be done on Chol Moed. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ein mechavshin es harichayim b'tchila. A person's not allowed to literally press down. I'm going to explain what this is. A millstone originally. So my mechavshin, what does it mean you can't press this down? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he says menaker richaya. It's referring to smoothing down the stone. Says Rashi, shekishihaya yeshana b'chalka, that when it's an older oven, so you're going to want to press it down to smoothen it out a little bit. That's what a person typically would do when it comes to these types of ovens. Okay, so that's one pshat mechavshin. Let's continue this Rashi. This is actually also question 9b. Rabbi Yehuda ein mechavshin es reichayim b'chadchila my pirush mechavshin. So this is one explanation. So which again we're in the middle of this Rashi, that a person is according to him is not allowed to do this. He's not allowed to smooth this out. This millstone rather, which was old. Yechayla lifreich menakrinaisa chaytchinaisa. You like cut it. Kadei hey shaveh, so it's not even. Kadei shivchu chitim tachtah. So this way you'll be able to break the wheat underneath it. So if it's exactly completely smooth, so the problem is that it's not going to be able to do its job. So by fixing it, that's what it's referring to. According to Rabbi Chil, Omer Bas Eino, which has to do with the hole where the grain is put in. The neck of Shaisin be'emsa harichayim shetavu nofelos tocha. So you basically make this hole so the grain can go into it. So those are the two questions, or this question 9b is says lenaker se'evan shelo hayachalka midi. Regarding smooth, because again that's how you grind it up, or to actually make this basina, this hole, which is where you put the actual grain. So that he does not want you to do. Okay, so Mesa. So the Gemara asks the following. It says Mamidin tanor v'yukaram b'moed. So like our Mishnah, that you can make these things. U'v'van yigmor malachta. You can't finish your job, finish it up. You can even complete it. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmai Mamidin es hachadasha, that you can make a new one. U'mechavshin es yeshana, and you could be mechavshin. Exactly what that means is the two opinions. An older oven. V'yesh Omer ein mechavshin kol iker, that you cannot do this at all. Now Bishul Mamadi Omer mechavshin menaker richaya is referring to, as we said, having to do with the smoothing it out. That's why he mentions it's old. It makes sense. So that's what happens when it gets old. It doesn't have the same ability to grind it up. Therefore, you may need to fix it. If it's an older millstone, then you shouldn't have to create this basaina, because that's the whole purpose of it. In order to be able to put the grain in, it was already done. If it was already an old millstone, so it's a kasha according to the shita basaina, because we don't find that you would need to make a basaina for an old millstone. Gemara says kagoyin de kaboy larvuche tfei porta. Well, it may already be there, but you want to make it a little bit bigger. Okay. Rav Huna Shamalahu Garbadika Menakari Chaya B'chol Moada. So he overheard there was a person that was grinding up his grain, and he was actually making this millstone. He's fixing it on Chol Moed. Omer Manhai Ischel Gufi Dika Machal Chol Moada. Who is this person? He's been violating Chol Moed. Sabula Kiyeshayimrim must be that he holds like the shita of the Yeshayimrim. Who are the Yeshayimrim? So he said, according to the Yeshayimrim, we just quoted, Yeshayimrim in Mechavshin Kolikar. So that's the reason why he said, how could he be doing this? Because he must hold like this more stringent opinion. Darshan Chama, Naikrin Rechaim B'Mayid, Mishamei Meir, Omer Afilu, Sus Shareichav the Chamor Shareichav Umotulito Serpranam B'chol Shemoyed. So it says that even to, a horse to ride on it, or a donkey to ride on it, is mutter. It says on the side is mutter, and also you can lital tziparna b'chol shemoyed, which seemingly is talking about cutting the nails. So look at Rashi, last line: ischal gufei ischalo gufei mutter litoil hem tziparnaim keder cha'isim achshav hususim shalanu de'ilu avid lei hachi habilit sar v'lo matzi azal. So it's not talking about cutting your own fingernails. It says Rashi is talking about removing the nails that a person would do for horses, because if you don't do this, it's going to cause a lot of tsar, and these animals will not be able to move. So you can fix and cut whatever needs to be cut, so that there'll be no tsar for these animals as we continue to Medbeis. Abul Chamra, when it comes to a donkey, Derechaya lo, that we're not going to allow by the millstone. It says Rashi Shikach Eisen Hayu Shahayu Toichnin Agav Chamoirim. This is what they would do. They would grind with these donkeys. Lo Matzil Mishkala Hu Chamra Siparnov. We're not able to deal with his nails. The Lo Matzi Lemidchan B'Moyed El Lotzarech Moyed. Because you can only do something which is Lotzarech Moyed. And therefore, when it comes to their nails, because you can't, it's an issue, so therefore we're not allowed to use them either. It says Rashi, continuing, Hilchach Tachina Muetes Yachalidchain B'Chamor. You can grind a little bit with a donkey, V'lo Merele Gidol Tziparnov. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Shar L'Mishkal Tufrei L'Chamer D'Rechaya, that he allowed you to take the nails of a donkey from the millstone. Ukmi rechayil, mibni rechayil, mibni almas rechayil, mibnei oraya. And he also said you can take the millstone to the bnei rechaya, from the bnei almas rechaya to the bnei oria. Says Rashi, lahamid lahasim herechayim zu al gavzu, to put these millstones one on top of the other. Amos Rechaya is the eights. Sherichayim Banu Yalav. This is a part of the millstone. Livnei Ori is the refes bakar, which is for cattle. Fine. Rav Shara was Ruke Susya. He allowed you to comb horses. Umivne Akaripa, and to build. Rashi says, where we put grain for our animals, you can build that. You can also build this platform, which is a binyan, Rashi says, of avanim, of stones. He says you're allowed to actually do bloodletting of animals on Chol HaMoed. this supports what you said, that you can actually do bloodletting for an animal. The ain moinin refuah behema b'chol shemoed. We're not going to hold back any ways of healing an animal on Chol HaMoed. That is 100% allowed. And Taisa says over here, the refuah behema sheish b'malacha ayri. Obviously, even when it comes to malacha, or refuah she'ein bo iser malacha, rak gazer mishum schika samanim afil b'shavas ikol man deshari, etc. Ayin Taisus. So the chiddush here is even if it's a malacha. Rabbi shori lekaskuse kirme, that we allowed you to iron clothing, which is gihuts, as Rashi says. My taima masa hedyetu, because the act of ironing is considered to be a masa hedyet, and as we said, masa hedyet is allowed to be done on Chol Moed, not just masa uman. Amrav Yitzchak Barami, Amrav Chista, Keturi bire aser. Says Rashi, what is that referring to? This cannot be done with Chol Moed. Shaynoitlim kelim chalukin. They would take these vessels. V'hayu machlikin alehem beis yad shel chalukehen, and they would make like a hole into the shirt. Masi uman huv aser. So according to this pshat, it's like you're finishing up the last touches of a garment, and that's something which is masi uman. That's why you cannot do it. Amarava man de miskil ara adaita de beidari shari adaita de ara asa. If a person is smoothing the ground, now it depends what his intention is. If it's in order to be able to make a threshing floor, that's allowed. However, his intention is to be able to improve the ground, that is aser. Says Rashi, shechayfer mishum ha'adam lo tzarech ha'goyren. So if you're doing it, again, just for the sake of the threshing floor, it's allowed. But if you're doing it, that you're digging it in order to be able to make it for more suitable for planting, that you're not allowed to do, that is not allowed to be done. Now the question is, hechidami, what's the case? So mulya b'mulya b'natza adaita beidari. The question is, how do you know what this person's intentions are based on their actions? Shakal mali v'shada b'natza adaita da'ara. So we can figure out if it's for the threshing floor or for the ground. Says Rashi, mulya b'mulya shenaitel hakarka b'makam gavoa. If he takes the earth from a higher place, manichu sham al gabi makam gavoa, and he ends up placing it also in a higher place, that's mulya b'mulya. O natza b'natza shechayfer b'makam nomoch. You dig in a lower place, manichu b'makam nomoch, and again you put it on a low place. Dainu adaita da'ara. This is all for the das of the ground. This is the way a person typically plows their field, and therefore, if they're taking it, if they're doing it in this way, then it's clear that you're doing it for the sake of the ground, and that is something which is not allowed. The Yomi Rabbi Haiman the Zachi Ziche Adaita the Tzibishari Adaita the Ara Aser. So a person. Actually, we have to look at this next Rashi. V'shada b'natza, but makam namuch hainu adaita de beidari. The garin shekach darka shel garin shemishava hagranos v'zeh mutter. It's when you smooth it out, that is clear that that's mutter, and that's the idea. That when it comes to plowing, some parts are higher, some parts are lower, but if it's all smoothed out, then it's obviously a garin. For threshing floor, it's mutter. Now zachid zachaya has to do with sweeping. Shemachabi nesakarka, like you sweep up the earth, the eitzim katanim, from these small branches, shalesh and noitim, that are on the ground. So the question is, what are your intentions? It was a daita to shari. If your intentions are, says Rashi, im liktan adaita de eitzim lahasikon. If the whole purpose is to gather up firewood, then that's okay. However, the adaita de ara also, if you're trying to do it to be able to improve the ground by removing these small branches, then it's aser. If you take small branches and take the big branches and leave the small ones, it's clear that you're doing it for firewood. Shakal Ravri Vizutri Adaited Arb. If you're gathering up all of them, then it's clear that your intention is to improve the ground. So typically when a person is going to be gathering up firewood, you're going to obviously only take the ones which are suitable for fire. And therefore, if you take the big ones and you leave the small pieces of wood, that's clearly for firewood, and therefore that's what's allowed. Yomi Rabbi Haiman de Pasach Maya Ara and he opens up water for his earth, for the ground, adaita de kavri shari. If he's doing it for catching fish from that's coming through that water, it's allowed. Adaita de ara also. If he's trying to water the ground, that he's not allowed to do. So hechidami pasach trei vavi. If he opens up two sides, chad miloi v'chad mitatoi, one above, one below, adaita de kavri. It's clear that he's doing it because he wants the fish to be caught through. Pasach, however, pasach chad bava daita de ara. If he only opens up one side, he's clearly doing it for the earth because he wants to capture the earth, the water, from continuing. Says Rashi, chad shabai nichnasin hamayim leguma, that it goes into a hole. The nichnasim afadaga leguma. So also the fish are going to go into the hole. V'chad shehamayim yoitzim chutz leguma. One is that the water goes out of the hole. V'dagim mishtayrim b'tocha, and the fish stay there. V'loichanaisam hainu shari the hainu adaita the kavri. So in that case, it's clear that you're doing it for the sake of for the fish. However, if it's possible, if you only do one side, the pasach chad baba shabot nechnasam hamayim leguma, the water goes into the hole. The idach pesach shabot yoitzin hamayim lechutz lo pasach. So in that case, you can't do it because your das is clearly for to improve the ground. Okay, Yom Rabbi Haiman de pashach dikla adaita de chevasa shari adaita de dikla aser. So a person who is pashach dikla, Rashi says shezaymer hadekla, you're pruning a tree from branches. So if you're doing it for chivasa, says Rashi, that these branches are fit for animal consumption, that's not allowed. If you're doing it in order to fix up the tree, it's aser. So if you're taking off only from one side of that chivasa, because why are you only doing it from one side, not the other side? It must be because you're doing it not for the tree, but you're doing it to feed the animals. However, you're taking from both sides, then that form of pruning gives the impression that you're probably doing it in order to be able to improve the tree. And that's awesome. Yom Bahani Tamri to chalni migarzrinhu shari miatzrinhu aser. So these Tamri tochalni, Rashi says Tamarim shunisbal shel kol tzarchim. So these are unripened dates. So migazrinhu shari miatzinhu aser. So what does this mean? So miatzinhu, once they're crushed, it's aser l'kaivshan b'maso yemaitzi leicha, to get the liquid out. Shebehen l'chutz the hainu aser shachshav enu nivloyim elasas mehem smukim. The whole purpose of doing this is to make grapes. L'ochan b'chol, l'ochan b'chol. Your whole intention is to eat them during the weekday. You're not allowed to fix something on Yom Tov for something which is for a weekday. And therefore, one is not allowed to crush them because you're showing that the intention is not for the fruit, but rather for a later time. So the liquid comes out. But if you're doing it, in order to be able to eat them, it's mutter because l'tzarech Yom Tov, it's mutter. However, again, if you're crushing them, which shows that you're really doing it for the future, in order for the grapes to turn into raisins, well, that consumption is going to take place afterwards on the chayil, and therefore it's aser. Rapapa oimer kivan de misloi keprakmati ha'aved dami v'shari. Since it would otherwise rot or spoil, this is considered to be a pragmatia, a business transaction, which would cause you financial loss, and therefore it is permissible. So anytime we have a davar ha'avid, as we've been learning, that is permissible. The Yom Rav Yosef bar Avin, we have a davar ha'avid mutter. Again, when it comes to davar ha'avid, it's allowed. Ravina Havilei how iska, he had this business dealing, the Havi Mizdamin Meshita Alfe, which was a significant amount of money. Shahe Lizvune, he waited for the transaction. Basar Choyl de Moada, he waited until after Chol Moed. The Zamni Betrayasar Alfe, he ended up selling it for double the amount. So, in fact, even though it could have given the impression that davar ovid is mutter, but nonetheless, by waiting, it ended up being beneficial for him. Ravina Havi Masik Zuze Bivnei Akara Deshoasa. So Ravina, he lent money to these people, says Rashi, Shahayu Chayavin lo Mois Boisamakom. So Asa Kamed Rav Asher Malay Mahu Mazel Inna Elihu. Can I collect money that's owed to me on this day? Generally Kivan Inna who Demishkachas who Biyam Achrini Lo Mishkachas who Kabrakmati Avidam Vishari. Since today you're able to come across them, but not on another day. So therefore, if you don't do it now, it's going to end up becoming like a davar ovid. Therefore, you're allowed to collect today. Tiny nami gabi avodah zara. Ki gabno. What is that? Hoyachin, as we continue down from Aleph, and comes hoyachin we read shel akum, which is the day of their marketplace. V'loichin behema vadim shvachais. You can go and purchase animals and servants, maidservants, shvachas, batim, sadas, kramim, the kaisav umala be'arkasai shulhan, and you can write and use their judges, mipnei shehu k'matzel miyadon, because it's considered like matzel miyadon if you wouldn't do so. Says Rashi, v'kayamin b'chasim asan, the kivan dahashtahu the mishkachas lahu yom achrin lo shari. Because today they're found, tomorrow they're not found. Therefore, again, it's a similar idea of a davar of it's allowed. Fine. Rav Shar Lechia Barashi Migdal Ohari Bechol Muada. So Rav allowed Chibarashi Ohari. Rashi says Shitsadin by Dugim, that he allowed him to make nets to catch fish on Chol Hamoyed. That he did allow. How my time, because Maseh Hedidu, making nets for fish is something which is not difficult. Although easily usher. When it comes to traps for birds, that is a little bit more complicated. My time Maseh Umanhu, therefore you can't do it. Yehuda Sharol Ame Tenori Lamigdal Tenure. So he allowed him to basically fix up an oven, to prepare an oven. Says Rashi, Lasso Satanor Mechadash, to make an oven from new. However, Rav Bar Isbi Lamigdal Mahuchta, as well as to make a sifter. So Eini v'hatani Rabbi Shmuel v'shaman she'ein goydlin tanu chatchila. How could he have allowed him to do this? We find the Pharisees are not allowed to make an oven from new. So kasha kami mosachama kami mosagashamim. It depends on which chol hamod we're talking about. Says Rashi. Mosacham in the summer months kalaymer kasheshi mosachama in Pesach. So in that situation, the ein yardim bogashamim, there's no rain that's going to come. So mutter lasas bo tanor. You can make an oven there. Lefisha alter yavish. It's going to dry up quickly. Yechol afos bo pas beregel. And therefore you can actually use that oven on Chol HaMoed. Kan mimos hagashamim. Kolaimer kashi yardim hagashamim berega kam besukkos. When it's still rainy, like during Chol HaMoed Sukkos, enois and tanur lafish enu yavish altar doesn't get dried up right away. Adleach haregel the yavet tircha shalitzarach haregel. You end up doing a tircha shalitzarach because you're going to make an oven which you can't use. So you can use an oven provided that you're going to use it. But if it's an oven that's not going to be able to be used with Tzarech Moed, then a person is not allowed to do so. Okay, let's stop here. Let's see a couple more questions. Question 10. Amra Haiman Damasko Tikla Adaited Be Dari Shari. So we end up saying a person who is going to dig holes, so it's allowed if it's made into a threshing floor. The question is, how do we find that that's what ends up happening? So, if you take it from a high place and you put it into a low place, that is a threshing floor, you're making it flat, and that's allowed. That doesn't look like you're digging holes for planting purposes. And then it says, so, it depends. Are you allowed to cut off, gather up branches? So if it's for the sake of firewood, then it's allowed. So what is that referring to? That's the Nakad Ravravi Vishavak Zutri. If you see that he takes big pieces and leaves the small ones, then that's clear that he's not doing it to clean up his grounds, but rather he's doing it in order to be able to use the good pieces for firewood. Question 11. Ezo halacha b'moed cholak dina bein chol moed pesach chol moed sukkos uma tam hachiluk, which we just saw, which making a new oven. On Pesach it's allowed. If you shall alter misyavesh, it's dried up, and therefore it can be used on moed. However, in Sukkot it's aser because it will not dry, and therefore will not. It's going to be a tircha shlot tzarich haregel, and therefore it's aser to do. Okay, TA 29. Masargin es amitos. Rabbi Yosef Omer memadchin. So this we already had on Yudamud Aleph. So let's just go to that daf. So the question he asks is, what does it mean? Mahu masargin l'maskana umahu mamadchin. So what is it referring to? So he wants us to write masargin is Shesi and Erev, and mamadchin is a machlokas if it's Shesi below Erev. Oh, she'imahay rafay mamadchay. Okay, so it's pretty similar to what we had before. Again, whether it's referring to Shesi. So masargin is one thing, and then the other pins. Oh, we even allow you to do this Shesi below Erev, or he allows this, which is Shesi below Erev, or Shim Hayirafi Mamadchay, that if it was already there, you can just tighten it up, and that's allowed. Okay, TB 30. So if you're gathering the big pieces, believe in the small ones is allowed, because it's das eitzim lahasaka we're using for fire. However, you're taking the big and small pieces also to have the karka, that's clearly for the ground, and that is not allowed. Ad kan.